All right.
Hey folks, welcome. We'll just give another couple minutes for other people to trickle in, and we'll get going here.
Okay.
Welcome. I see a lot of familiar names. Looks like a lot of folks who were also in the presentation from Dave Cohen earlier this week.
Good. And also at the Why We Cycle?
Yep. Yep. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jonathan Weber. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Livable Streets Program Manager at Local Motion. I think most of you probably know about Local Motion, but our mission is to make biking and walking a way of life here across Vermont. These learning network events are supported by the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I'm really excited for this event in particular. I think it's going to be super interesting. Stu is always fun to listen to. He's got he's a wealth of facts and unknown figures that they always come out when he's telling stories. So I think this will be a treat. Hopefully most of you are relatively familiar with GoToWebinar, but we're going to keep everyone muted during the presentation. We will have some time afterwards to take some questions and hopefully have some discussion. If you have questions during the webinar, we will hopefully take some. I'll just interrupt Stu if there's a relevant one. So feel free to post those in the chat or in the questions panel. Either one works. I'll be watching them both. At the end, if you want to use the hand raise function to ask a question, that's in the control panel as well. If you do raise your hand, I will unmute you, and I'll sort of let you know that we're waiting for your question, and you'll also have to unmute yourself. So just be aware of that. If you have any technical issues, feel free to post them again in the chat or in the question box. You can email them to me at jonathan@localmotion.org. That's JONATHON, localmotion.org. We are recording this webinar today, and you'll get a link to it in the follow-up email. So let's get started. As I said, our presenter today is Stu. Stu Lindsay is one of the gentlemen behind our valet bike parking program at Local Motion. He helped to revive it and made it this really successful service that we offer during normal times when we can gather and have events. Parks thousands of bikes every year there. And Stu will tell you that he's not an expert, but he's also quite a world traveler, and he's someone who has a lot of firsthand knowledge of places like the Netherlands that we like to talk about. So I always like to talk to Stu and learn about his experiences and see what we can glean and bring back here to Vermont. So that's really what we're here to do today. Just hear from Stu about some of the things that he saw, what really worked well, and we may not get into the nitty-gritty of how exactly to implement these things here in Vermont, but I think there will be some really great ideas sparked. So without further ado, take it away, Stu.
Good. Inspirational, we'll hope.
Exactly.
Yep. So I'll preface it with the opinions expressed are mine and not necessarily those of the Vermont Clean Cities and Local Motion. And also say I'm not an academic or an expert in urban planning, and this is very much a presentation from a curious and interested layman. So that said, we'll grab our stroopwafel. Where to go? Our stroopwafel and cup of coffee, and we'll start the slides. And I'm going to disappear from here. Hopefully everyone can still hear, and we'll begin. Walk 21 is an international symposium congress on walking. So participants came from all over the world. actually not too many from the US, but a few. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to attend. And this is somewhat of it's not going to focus a lot on the dry part of the conference, but a lot of what's going on in Rotterdam, city of about 650,000. And I did a fair amount of walking around there, so we'll see where it goes. And hopefully everybody knows what the little white object is in the picture, about as common as a dial telephone. So, good. Okay. So Walk 21 happened in these slides were all from October. Seems long ago and far away, but about a year ago. And the motto for Rotterdam is make it happen. And they're doing a pretty good job on that. The theme of the conference was smart, healthy, and for everyone. So I'll start, journey has to start from somewhere. And it's less expensive to fly into Schiphol than it is to fly into Rotterdam. So I started from there. This, incidentally, is one of the little bikes that I toured around the Netherlands on, which actually worked quite well. And in the airport, the first thing I noticed, just a nice, bright airport, but you'll see that there's a meeting point, and which is quite visible everywhere you go. That you'll see there's meeting points, and that brought me back to Taoyuan Airport in Taiwan, where there's the North meeting point. In the Taipei subway is a meeting point. They have various meeting points around, and it just seems something that maybe that could come over here. Even at the Congress, they spelled out that there were meeting points, and everybody would then just congregate in that area. In the airport, one of the things that they do is have local entertainment. And this is just a brief clip of one of the groups. Whoops, just a second here. I'll figure this out. If there's a national color, it's orange. Whoops, there we go. If you were traveling with your bicycle and on the train system, folding bicycles all travel for free. If you have a conventional bicycle, you have to buy a ticket for it, but it's good for the whole day. So whether you're going one stop or many, it's all going to be the same price, about €5. But this gentleman has his folder with him. And when you're getting on the train, you look for the symbol of the bicycle. And you can see that a bunch of people have their bikes on there already. Excuse me. So you'll know you're in the Netherlands when you look out the window and you see a fietsenstalling or secure bike parking. This is just one of the little stops and just one of the thousands of bicycle spots. Some are watched, and some are just going to be leaving your bike at just unattended. But this is where the concept of having secure bike parking here originated after my wife and I took a trip through the Netherlands by bike. And you come out to Central Station, which is one of the largest train stations in Europe. About 100,000 people a day use it. And pretty modern design and draws you into it. Now, when I went, oops, I'll just go back a couple. When Todd Littman spoke here from Victoria, BC, he was looking at the biggest advance in personal transportation. And to him, he said, how many people arrived on their Segway today? How many people showed up in a flying car? We have all these concepts of what the future is going to look like. But to him, the greatest advance was in personal transport was rolling luggage, which certainly shows here people rolling their suitcases. But what I decided to do before I left, you can see the tiny wheels at the bottom. I fabricated these little adapters, which allowed me to put a much more substantial wheel on, and it rolled beautifully. Much easier way to transport your luggage around town. And you have to stay somewhere when you go to a conference, and I'm as frugal as the Dutch. So I chose a place called the City Hub, which is a capsule hotel. And the capsule hotel is like these L's. I was room 5, and so my bed was up above. Room 6 slept down here. The shutters closed, absolutely perfect. I think it cost me 40 euros a day, which was great. You enter your room with a wristband. That's your key. The lights are all controlled by your cell phone. You get an app that you download, and you can put your Wi-Fi in. You've got enough headroom to be able to sit up in bed. And it looks like they took a building and basically gutted it. And then they put these IKEA-like modules together. They are in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and they just opened in Copenhagen, where they had a special for 30 euros a night. It's a great way to stay. And when you leave to go out on your adventure around town, one of the things they give you is a mobile Wi-Fi router, and it just charges with your cell phone plug, and you have Wi-Fi everywhere, complimentary, and it worked like a charm. So you were connected all the time. Don't know why we don't have those over here. So the conference brought in a few hundred people from around the world, both as speakers and attendees. And it had basically 3 themes: smart, healthy, and for everyone. You'll be able to access these slides later if you want, so I'll only spend a moment or two on them. But the city has to be able to adapt to transitions with smart modern design and new mobility solutions. So they're taking definitely pedestrians, but then how does that tie into mass transit, something that Europe just does so well. Healthy, WHO, the World Health Organization, just came out and again focused on sitting as the new smoking, and that if we can just get people to be more active, we're going to be a healthier community, and it's going to be better for the climate, better for your pocketbook if you're walking, and you're going to stay healthier. And as they say, everyone is a walker. So that like the 880s city program out of Canada, creating safe and attractive streets for children and elderly people first delivers a public benefit for everyone. If it's good for a child at 8 and an adult at 80, then everyone can use it. On the healthy theme, Um, Walking is man's best medicine. And one of the presenters um, was a doctor who had a walking prescription for walking. And what he did, we often prescribe people medication, but walking can be just as beneficial, if not better. And so what he does is twice a week, he goes for a walk with a group of patients that want to join him. And the nurse and manager will join us if they can. And some people look forward to it for the whole week. So he started that, but as he said in his talk, dozens of GP practices in Rotterdam are now following our lead. So you have a lot of you could go for a walk with your doctor and both get more information, and it brings the importance of exercise. So I thought that was a pretty innovative situation. You can see them walking in the Dutch sunshine, a little bit of rain. And that was backed up with a study from St. Michael's University in Toronto. Residents of less walkable areas are 1/3 more likely to have long-term cardiovascular risk. So the more that Chapin DPW keep the sidewalks clear, the healthier we'll be in our society. One of the aspects was streets for kids. And they created a periscope mask that when you put this on your head, you then have the perspective of a small child and see just what they're seeing when that big 4x4 truck is right beside them. This is about 1 meter high, and they created a series of masks down here, which mounted onto a meter stick. And then the people would hunch over and walk around the area with these masks, looking through the eyeglass part to see what a child would see at that height. That was an innovative program coming out of Brazil. Putting walking as a serious means of transport is smart. Not building the cities without sidewalks, which was a mode in the 60s where they didn't believe people would need to walk. Hartford, Connecticut is a good example of that. And many of we had workshops, but they were walk shops. And we went out to have a walk around some of the various things that Rotterdam has done in their projects. This was called City Lounge and was originally a parking lot and parking garage, which they renovated, put an artificial turf on, and these are seats that the locals will push around, maybe bring 2 or 3 together as a cluster, but they're indestructible. And you saw all sorts of kids and adults lounging on them, sitting on them. And on top of that, they had, for the summertime, a sprinkle system, so the kids would have a fountain to run through, and then it would just die down. But that was how they renovated an old parking garage. In this case, we had trees on the little platforms, and we wheeled them into a street which had automobiles. And for demonstration purpose, they blocked the street to car traffic. And they were going to leave them there for a month to see whether it disrupted the flow of automobile traffic. And if it didn't, then they say, see, we didn't need cars on that street anyways. So that was one way that they were going to demonstrate the effectiveness of a pop-up as Locomotion is doing, and that was just an innovative way to do it. They also had a program where they want to remove as much parking as possible, and who asked for it were the merchants. This is a street scene along Blockstraat, I think it was. And this is a before picture with all the cars. It was noisy and, you know, accidents as people open doors. And what it looks like now is this. So they've put in all the flowers along, and they even have a spot where somebody can go and sit and enjoy the flowers. And the street's much quieter. The stores did not lose any business, and they can just continue to do that program around town. The Dutch Cycling Embassy was there, and one of their posters was 10 ways of improving bikeability that can improve your city's walkability. So you'll be able to access this later, but you know, eyes on the street improve social safety. The more people that are out, the potential to replace trucks with cargo bikes, and you know, just all sorts of things that you can take a look at a little later. This is one of the old churches we walked by, and this was all pavement. In this illustration, and what they decided to do was pave or put grass down, and it's now a parklet within the city that people can use. They still have enough access to be able to walk around St. Lawrence Kirk, and so it's all grassed, and then they have a performance stage at the back of it. And tucked into a corner is seating, and there'll be a fair amount here on these seats, which are interesting. We'll see here. And then as you're walking through a park, they do a good job on signage. In this case here, just a park that you're allowed to barbecue, but they're gonna set out the rules, and hopefully people will obey those. But at least you know, they can have the barbecue within an urban environment. And it also celebrates being a city on the Rotterdam River. They certainly celebrate walks along the wharfs and piers. So one of the things, one of the talks was on how do you create shorter walks. Everybody wants to get from A to B as quickly as possible and hopefully as pleasantly as possible. So we were able to go out and experience the session firsthand. And so it's either going over the railroad tracks, because there's railroad tracks everywhere, through a building or over a building. And this is called the Luxingel walkway. And you can see the yellow it just goes everywhere. And what it did was, because of the busyness of the streets, railroad tracks, North Rotterdam was cut off from the centrum. And so with this, they did a crowdfunding where all the boards that went in, 4,000 people crowdfunded it, and starts a little further over to the east, but this just gives a good example of what they've been able to do. And you'll see here on this roof, and you'll see a bit more of that here in a minute. So you start up, you're walking up the stairs, and this was a building that was originally determined to come down. They said, well, how can we get to the other side of this easily. And they said, well, can we poke a hole through it? And so what they did was take out the two side walls and create a walkway through the center of the building. And so it's a test, but it's certainly a commitment. And you can walk, now you can take the shortcut right straight through the building. And they, with street art and graffiti is always going to show up. It's a pleasant walk. You feel completely safe in there. And you continue walking through another building, which they accessed. And as I'm walking through, I see this little sign that says Rooftop Farm. And I'm wondering, what's that about? So I take a detour, and it is the first and largest rooftop farm in the Netherlands, one of the largest harvestable roofs in Europe. And it's about 7 floors up. So I hiked up, and on the deck, when you keep going up the steps, and this is your food roof. So they harvest food, lots of herbs and vegetables and other foods in the area. And they also run a little cafe that you're able to pick up your coffee and sit up there. So I thought that was an innovative idea that fit into the whole Luxingo. And it just keeps going. You can see all the people's names on the boards that they sponsored, 4,000 of them. And it was interesting as people would walk, these people were from Peru that were visiting, and everybody seemed to stop and talk. It was quite pleasant. You could either, once you got to a spot that you could now go down to the streets, you've avoided the various tracks and streets, and you would then be able to continue your journey, and it just kept going on and on. So some of the things that they also talked about were faster routes. And I think of the corner of Prospect Street and Main Street up at the university, where they have a Barnes dance, where when the light changes, people can go any way that they want, or down at Pearl and North Winooski. But the interesting thing here is that from the automobile standpoint and from the pedestrian standpoint, they understand that you can walk in all directions. And I'm thinking that visual signal would be great to have here in Burlington, because when you see somebody walking without that, you wonder, is it legal to do that? Because the signals don't necessarily say that. And in this case, what they had were slow and fast lanes for walkers. Now, there may be some people walking in the wrong direction, but the outside lanes were supposed to be slower and walking at a faster pace in the center lanes. In Norway, Trondheim, which has the famous bicycle lift that goes over, they redesigned a lot of their shortcuts to make it much easier for the pedestrians. And so there's a before picture of the little path, and with little expense, relatively speaking, they were able to make it into a much more attractive path for people to travel on. In this case here, it went from a set of rickety stairs to a well-organized stairs with a little spot to have a seat. And here, again, these were all paths, probably lines of desire where somebody decided this was where it was going to be, but it just gets worn out. and over to this, where they've got a proper railing, and so it will dramatically increase its usage. And the same in here. Just made it much more accessible, much more pleasant to be able to walk in that area. So, and again, coming out of the Netherlands or out of Norway, just looking at some of the benefits of creating better mass transit and pedestrian issues. So you can come back and look at those at your leisure. But local access for pedestrians should have facilities for bicycle parking, facilities for park and ride, and attractive transfer environments. Phil Hammerslaw was telling me about the bus stop at his area had the protection from the wind with the plexiglass, but it's all been removed. And so if it's cold and rainy, it's not very pleasant to wait for the bus for 15 minutes. They could do a much better job on making sure that people are comfortable at those locations. And the facilities for bike parking, when you have proper facilities at your origin and your destination, you're more likely to choose a bike. So what they're looking at, the Norwegian walking strategy, was strengthening the role of the pedestrian, but also help the local transportation companies to realize that the pedestrian infrastructure is an important part of their service provision, because all their customers are pedestrians. And they had quite a few interesting strategies on that. I've got more information if anybody needs it. And then one of the presenters from London, England, was talking about an app that they have developed called Go Jauntly. And what it does is it gives you the variety of opportunities. Do you want to just go for a leisurely walk? Do you want to get from A to B quicker? Do you want something that's a healthier walk? And they have it divided up so you can choose one of these, and excuse me, and then that will plot your walk for you. And they're looking at taking this both through England, but also making it a more international app. Then on the final day, Lloyd Wright was speaking. He runs one of the international development banks out of Asia. And he was talking about how do you finance the walkable city. And a flyover is an overpass. So he's saying for the same price of one flyover, you could buy 400,000 bicycles, you could build 800 kilometers of quality footpaths, or 80 years of weekly car-free events. So, and there's a move afoot. If anybody remembers, in Montreal, they had the flyover that came down as the access into the city that they removed, and is now European-style sculptures that are interactive. People can walk on them. There's areas to play, and it's a much more accessible entrance into Montreal. And Taipei has done the same thing. And what he was saying was that there are lots of places that money is available for the different programs that somebody may want to come up with. A lot of these are ones that would be familiar to us, and that maybe there's some opportunities there for an innovative program right here in Burlington. So, and walkability is not a financial issue. It's not a technical issue. it's a political issue. So it really is committing to making a community walkable. And that's something we have to look at, and not just doing something as temporary or the cheapest way, but really making the commitment to it. And this one stuck with me. Money never starts an idea. It is the idea that starts the money. So you can't just throw the money at it. But if you've got a valid idea, there'll be those that will want to fund it. So that's been inspirational. So a little bit on bikes and biking. I've cycled with this lady in a few spots. There's certainly lots of seniors, and they bicycled from Houghton into Utrecht with a bunch of seniors, probably in their 70s to 90s, that had gone into town shopping, so they had all their groceries with them, and it was difficult to keep up with them. They were just like her, on their way. So again, lots of bikes like Bromptons, so that people will have that multimodal. She's going from being out of the train station, put her bike together, and away she goes. This was one of the cargo bikes that was on the street. This was carrying beer. You'll notice that it's a certainly electric assist. This one here was a refrigerator freezer that was used for delivering goods around Amsterdam. And so in Colombia, they used to take bread into the areas in transport trucks, and they couldn't navigate the small streets. So they hired dozens of locals with cargo bikes to deliver the bread to the local mercados and bodegas. And you even have UPS that realizes how efficient a small vehicle can be for delivering their goods. The post office is in it. So they'll be able to deliver around town. The pizza is set up on a purpose-built electric bike, and a local courier. So both cargo bike, bob trailer, backpack, not too much more he could carry. And even the locals have resurrected an old style cargo bike for moving. And again, doesn't matter that it's raining out there. You'll notice a sign in the back, the Mobility Challenge. And I wondered, so I looked that up, and the Mobility Challenge, both residents and entrepreneurs to use shared transport such as electric cars, bicycles, cargo bikes for a 2-month period. And 90 residents are participating, and it includes 30 car owners who commit to leaving their cars in a car park outside of the district during the experiment. And they are then paid a transportation budget of 135 euros, plus some 50 euros for using public transportation. So interesting idea. Can they persuade people to leave their cars at home? This is about 8 o'clock in the morning down at the train station. And this is rush hour in Rotterdam on a weekday. Looks like chaos. But as they talked about in Why We Cycle, you could see people having eye contact, waving at each other, and they were certainly able to negotiate the busy streets with the cars, with the bikes, and even a skateboard in there. And this was school children going to school on a Friday morning, and you can see the roads. I do not know where the cars were, but the kids were on their way to school. They've got the separated feet pad or bicycle lane, so they're separated from the traffic. You'll see lots of bike parking everywhere. And I'll have a little more on that. And you'll often in one of the small towns, but you'll see parents bicycling, and they'll have their arm on their child, so that they're very cozy, and just like this, going to school. Maybe it's helping up a hill, or just to be in touch, but something that is very common. And this was 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in downtown Rotterdam. That again, where are the cars? You know, there's certainly lots of people in the picture, but not the automobiles. And we always think of cyclists as both energetic and lazy. And you'll find that all the grocery stores, they had a program called Cycle to Shop. And it was an initiative to have all the large grocery stores put bike racks right outside the entrance. And in this case, this is a natural food store. And they had this little foyer, and they allowed everybody to park on the inside. So they really were parking almost inside the store. And this is an example for Tony of a roundabout in Utrecht. And I'll just let this run here for a moment. So I had no idea what was coming up on me, but you'll see again that, and this is a very busy street, one miscreant here, but almost everybody obeys the law. Lots of cargo bikes. So all your bike paths are going to be painted red, and I'm not sure what the paint is, but it feels like a magic carpet. You seem to be able to move much easier on the painted surface than you can on just the standard asphalts. So, and we'll get into a little bit more on the cycling. One of the locals I was talking with, as we were talking about biking, he said, look for the bicycles with the blue front tires. And he said, those are called swap feet. And so once you're aware of something, I started looking around, and yeah, there's another one. And they're called a swap feet. And there's a lot more interest in Europe of not having to own something, but to rent or lease. And there's a fairly mobile community there in terms of working for a month or two and then leaving. So what people do is they rent a swap feet for about 15 euros a month, I believe. If it gets a flat tire, swap feet will send somebody out and fix it. They come with all the locks and chains, and they're now all across the Netherlands. So if you see, and you'll see in the pictures, a bunch more bikes that have the blue tires, and those are all swap feet. one of the things that somebody mentioned in the movie Why We Cycle, they showed somebody putting their bike up a trough. And this is down by the canals, and you're going from one level to the next. But instead of having your bike bounce up every step, they have a trough on the side. And it just makes it so much easier, especially if you've got a load on your bicycle. And here's one out in the country, another trough. And to get the bicycles down into this parking down by the Marthal, what they have is a trough built into both sides. So somebody going down, you've got some protective. So it just makes it so much easier. In Amsterdam, in one that is underground, they're experimenting with the trough on the down has brushes on the side, which will slow the descent of the bicycle. And on the other side is like an escalator, so that it will help to raise the cycle up out of the secure bike parking. So that way somebody who is a senior, deconditioned, will have a little bit of a boost both ways. And this is at a train station, so a very steep set of stairs, and yet they have the trough built right in. And here's one for even 2 steps. The door was right here, but it would still be a nuisance to try and push it down. So they just had a custom made trough. And I think we'll recognize this scene, which is down at the waterfront. And people are expected to push their bike up the ADA ramp. This is not a bicycle ramp. It's an ADA ramp for wheelchairs to make it accessible. But when I showed these before, and you look at, could these bushes be cut back and a trough installed so that somebody could take their bicycle right up there, because when the path gets closed for a concert, this is the only way, one of the only ways out oftentimes. And then the pedestrians and everybody are going through. What if there were a ramp? And Cindy from Parks and Rec was there, and she said, let's do that. So we'll see if we end up with a ramp along our stairs. And then again, people are biking all night. Not sure why this one was in here. And since 1960s, every apartment built in the Netherlands, I believe, is to have a bicycle room. As I bicycle around with a group called Vrienden op de Fiets, which is Friends of the Bicycle, and you have hosts, much like warm showers. And the one fellow said, I have 2 entrances, I'll meet you. And what it was, so I could take my bicycle into the bicycle room where he stored all his bicycles. So he had that facility in his home, but it was a modern apartment. In a lot of these older buildings, they would have to schlep the bicycle to the 3rd or 4th floor. So they have what's called a fietstrommel, a bicycle drum. And these are secure. They're controlled with a lock and key, and 5 residents can store their bicycle in there. They can lock it up when they're inside, but all 5 have a key to this. And Rotterdam has certainly a lot of these fietstrommels around. So it just, again, gives them a secure place to leave a bike. There's some other designs, and when I peered into them, you could see that they had their electric bike locked up. They could put an expensive bike. They didn't have to be a second-class citizen, leave a beater on the street and watch it get stolen or vandalized. So provide the facilities and the people use them. And they just petition for the fietstrommel to be installed in their neighborhood, and the city will accommodate them. So one of the things, this is a gentleman who was carrying a few things in Taipei. And most of us would not be quite that energetic, but he went quite a distance with this load. And the question becomes, as you're a pedestrian, how do you walk and carry things? So for a lot of people, the simplest thing is to just use a simple cart, shopping trolley, and you'll see these everywhere, and even nice wicker ones in the farmers markets. Now, they always have that stigma of being a granny cart, but that's not necessary. And you'll see in a store that sells luggage that they give them a wide selection. So it must be a popular idea. In a grocery store, in one of the grocery stores, what they had was a corral that you would put in. That here we have 12 locations for people to lock up their shopping trolley while they're using the conventional cart. This is within a Lidl grocery store. And once they've made their purchase, they come over. There's they drop in a coin, and that locks the car. Then they come back and they can use their token to retrieve their cart. They wouldn't be taking that amount of space in a grocery store if people weren't using it. So, and you see all sorts of people that would have the cart. And this was at the Artis Zoo. They love wheels. And these were little trolleys available for parents to haul their children around the zoo. And even the postman is mobile with wheels. One of the interesting things, and when you see a post box, you'll see, you'll see a ni and ya. And this is a sticker that everybody gets, and it's to determine. Nay means they don't want it, it's no, and so they don't want any junk mail. Ya may be that it's a weekly newspaper, something that is of interest to them, but it might be in its bulk mail. So they have the choice of either getting two nays or a combination of what they will accept, and the post office has to go by their wishes. So in terms of carts, I won't say too much about it right now, but you hopefully will soon see a lot of these lime green shopping trolleys around Burlington. So come springtime, keep in touch. So where I stayed before was the Capsule Hotel, and was only about $45. But I'd only reserved for 3 days, 3 or 4 days, and I wanted to stay an extra day, so I had to find another spot. My rate would have gone up to about 120. So I went on to booking.com or one of those to find another accommodation, and I came up with the Cube House, which is an architectural gem down in the Markthal area. We'll see that in a second. And the buildings here at the far end are all hostel. They're a stay okay hostel, and they were 39 euros with tax and breakfast. So I thought that was great. They're pretty adventurous looking buildings. They were originally student housing by a famous Rotterdam architect. And this is somewhat what they looked like. In the room that I was, the whole ceiling was vaulted, and I was in one of the top bunks. And I had flashbacks of Kafka, The Fly. I woke up feeling I was pinned to the ceiling, and because you could look out the windows as dawn was coming. But it was great. It was a wonderful spot to stay. This is the more conventional inside, and was centrally located, and hostels have a completely different focus there than they do here. Families, adults, kids, everybody stayed there. So it was a good spot to be able to meet people. And then the Congress was being held in this building here in the back. But after the conference, you've got to entertain yourself. So I tend to wander the city. And again, here are those interesting chairs. So tend to think of myself as a flaneur. And flânerie is a specific mode of strolling in which the exercise is a spatial practice, observing the interior and exterior public surfaces, spaces, reading the population, or someone who walks around not doing anything in particular, but watching people in society. So that would be more me. As I walk to the, just a second here. As I walked to the conference every morning, there would be gentlemen outside sweeping the streets. The city was clean as a whistle, and they were using twig brooms. And he would have his bags of trash that he'd picked up. And everything, every morning there'd be this whole crew of folks out there with these brooms sweeping things. And my first thought when I came back was, boy, are we ever messy when you look at the amount of weeds that are in the gutters and the trash. So it was interesting to see. This was an area where they would occasionally have to get a city vehicle through. And so there would be bollards, even though some are a little worse for wear. They had one of the bollards that would fold down and paint red so somebody's not going to trip over it, but then the vehicle could drive over it and then either leave it down or put it back up. Some of them are hydraulically operated, so you'll see the truck show up, hit a button, the bollard will retreat below ground. They drive over it and it comes back up again. Now, lots of cycle racks all over town. But one of the questions is it a cycle rack or defensive street furniture? These racks are actually designed that if there were a terrorist coming through and they hit the racks, they will not get through them. They are quite substantial. So they make it somewhat invisible technology. And a lot of the bicycle racks are installed at strategic locations. You'll notice that there's lots of bicycles. They're all well parked. The trolley's running down the street. One lane of cars, a bicycle path, and a little bit of parking. And so the people will use the bicycle paths or the bicycle racks until there isn't one. And then this is what happens. So you'll see, and again, you'll see the blue front tires on all of these. They're all swap feeds. But if you don't give them the infrastructure, then this is what results. And I wondered why there were no cars, very few cars parked on the street. And this was the box that you would check in. So your tariff was $4 an hour, €4 an hour, which would be $5, $6. So you either have the carrot and the stick. If somebody wants to pay, they can park, but it's going to cost them.
So I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. We're at time, but folks, if you can stick around for the presentation to finish up, that's great. Of course, if you have to go, that's totally fine as well. If you have any questions, if you can't stick around for a little bit, you can send those questions to me. My email is included in the follow-up that you'll get in about an hour, and I can also send those over to Stu, and we'll get back to you. So carry on, Stu.
Okay. So sorry I'm over the schedule, but hopefully it's going okay. This is a church that's in the downtown, and it was a church, but is now a shelter for homeless people, addicts, psychiatric patients, and those that have no guidance for the way of life, and vulnerable elderly people. So everybody goes in and can use it. Works like a charm. It seemed to really be doing a good job on supporting the social services there. So much like our way stations and various things. Again, traffic on the way into work, I'll speed it up a little bit. Again, you have multimodal, you've always got lots of trams running down. Somebody said this looks like Burlington with furniture left on the street. But again, this is 8 o'clock rush hour. So lots of people walking, lots of people biking, but very few cars. And so walking after hours, this was an area right near the Cube House, and about 8 o'clock at night, nice and open and accessible. And a little street that I wandered down, the cafe was a practiced silence conversation. And you'll notice that there is no Wi-Fi, no cell phones allowed. But you can have talks. They put on lots of different activities, but it's made to be quiet. Just across the street was a gym where they were training for, they were doing boxing. And you could hear all the grunts and groans and commands coming out of this. And then just a few steps further down, peering behind the paper on the walls, was a art class going on, drawing some zucchinis and squash. And so it was just a tiny street, much like some of the side streets off of Church. But again, it's 8 or 9 o'clock at night. There's still lots of people out, lots of activity going on. And, you know, it felt great to be part of that. And again, you could either have a bunch of BMWs and Mercedes parked here, or you could turn it into a greenery. And so it was another exercise in eliminating the car parking within this community. Where the action was in the library. And these are giant chess pieces. And this gentleman over here, everybody, there was about 8 people waiting to get a piece of them to see if they could beat him. And nobody did. I stayed around for a few chess games. But it was interesting to see, and with the Queen's Gambit and the popularity of chess, what a great idea. These people, and you'll see here in Amsterdam, it was with just different concrete pavers that they had a instant chessboard. One of the buildings would bring the chess pieces in the evening, and then during the daytime, people could play chess. One of the things they had was a hop-on, hop-off train, and these were the refurbished trolley cars from the 30s, and they were nicely restored, and they took you all over the area. It was raining and I had a couple of errands to run. This happened to go by where I wanted to go. And one of the places was Delfshaven, where you had a very traditional town just in behind this. But what's interesting is where the perspective from the trolley, is here's your road, and here's a divider between the bicycle path, which is over here, 2 ways, a cycle track, and then you have the pedestrian footpath. So everybody's accommodated, but you'll see that this is not a 4-lane highway. And we had to talk about mustaches. He won. And again, you saw the scene earlier where the bright red of the bridge, this is what the area looked like. And this was one of the little cafes that was looking out over it. But I noticed that there were no chains or barriers, anything along the way. And I asked, and I thought, well, would we allow that to happen over here? You know, our safety rules. And asked one of the waitresses, does anybody fall in? Well, occasionally, but it didn't seem to be of any great concern. And then as you walk around, you see how social they are and how they accommodate people to have a seat, sit and watch. Almost all of the times they will be facing out so that they can be people watching. They're not sitting looking at each other. A lot of the times they're going to be sitting in this nature. This was a small restaurant, and what they had was the lock, but on a sunny day, they could just unlock it. The legs would fold down and they'd have benches. So it took no space when they weren't using it. And then they had a spot for people to sit and linger. And again, you can see almost like stadiums seating. Everybody's looking out and watching people go by. And here are my favorite chairs again. And I'll show you here in a second. Again, you can see them from above, that they can be used for a variety of things. And here in a nice little park area, a good place for conversation. And another little hideaway pocket where the chairs are all located. This is at the McDonald's. And it turns out that it's called Rotterdam style. They were developed specifically for the city of Rotterdam to have a unique look. So they're both as chairs, benches, and if you're waiting for the bus or a train, they are leaning posts, so that everything is cohesive, but the people automatically know what to do with them. And why I like them, here we go. I thought that was, and I didn't realize until I walked by one and it moved. Just how clever a design it was, so that if an individual wanted to have their lunch, they could turn their back. And if there were a group of people, they would all turn their chairs towards them. So it was very flexible and yet very sturdy seating. So I was interested. I think that would be a great idea. And they always say culture shock comes not when you go to the other country, but when you come back to your own. And I came back and I looked at St. Paul Street, where we have a single bench, and our lonely bench on Church Street. You know, how do people congregate and chat? And I was thinking even of our new park, where the benches are all linear and you have to lean by somebody to talk to people on either end, whereas in the other one you're together like a conversation. And when they got the designers together for the new park, what did they choose? Granted, the benches aren't in, but they're all sitting in a chair. And so it'd be interesting to have an event, a sit-in on St. Paul, where people did bring their chairs. Maybe they set up a big chessboard, musicians, and give the street to the people and the sidewalks and just see what happens. This was all pre-COVID, so that was some ideas will have to change. But interesting to see how much more cozy, easier to talk in chairs. So, and public spaces everywhere there, and is certainly lots of ingenious ideas. Again, there's that bridge from the other side. So this is across the canals. And this was a slide for kids, like a fort, and they could slide down right to the very bottom. Got your walking path, your bicycle path in this area. And as I walked around and I went back over my slides, I realized one of the things that I appreciated were how green the city was. And if you looked at this corner where if that planter wasn't there, just how stark it would be. And yet it breaks up that area. You've got your bicycle path right here, you're walking. It just felt good. On a restaurant outside, some plants to give a barrier between the two. This was, I think, creeping time. The boxes, which would be, again, part of the strategy where you've got the defensive bicycle racks and these planters, and even little planters, but you can see all of the greenery in the area. And even down by the Bancor, that they've got lots of green in an otherwise stark environment. This was a little shed called Flower Power, and it's just tucked in off this little side street when they're closed. And but when I would walk by it and it was open, this is what it would look like. And it was just a riot of color. Run by a couple of women in the background here. And, so a car could come along here if they were buying some of the larger ones, or people were stopping in and taking flowers home. Most of the bikes in Amsterdam will have not water bottle holders, but vases. And their tulips are about 50 for $5. So why wouldn't you have tulips at home? But I thought this was a wonderful example of pop-up architecture. It's out of the way during the daytime, it's safe and secure, and yet when it opens, it does a great job. And then some store just put out, not advertising, but just a little blackboard where they would fill in a couple of different things every day. So just be happy. It drives people crazy. And on the other side was multitasking, screwing up several things at once. So moving on, the amount of sculpture and art that was around town. This was is called The Destroyed City. And in the Second World War, bombers from Germany came through, and they thought they were in Amsterdam, but they were in Rotterdam. And they bombed the wrong place. And they only I think strafed it once, but that was did an amazing amount of damage. And this, built in 1951, brought tears to your eyes. It was the bombs coming down, humanity looking at the damage that's about to be done. And around the centrum of the city where the bombs hit were these little medallions built in. You can see one here, 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 and that signifies the area that was hit by the bombs. And so you have old architecture on one side, new on the other. And a lot of people were, they said, do we rebuild the place, or do we build new? And they chose to build new. And so they have a little symbol of fire on the inside. So as you're walking by, they certainly bring that back to your memory. This was a little wall that was saved from the Second World War as part of a warehouse. And this sculpture and plaque is commemorating the deportation of 1,000 children, 1,000 Jewish children. And so their memories live on within this. But a stark reminder of what went on. So they're not letting you forget that. The Pipe is a little restaurant on a back street, and it still has, it's from the 1920s, and it still has a peephole door in it. And you still can't get in unless they open the peephole and accept you. And during the Second World War, because it was a men's only club, the Germans would not go in because it was not egalitarian. No women allowed, they wouldn't go. So that's where all the resistance fighters would go, was to the Pipe, and plot their strategies for overcoming the Germans.
Stu, since we're over, I think let's maybe try and just wrap it up real quick in a minute or so here, and then let's take some questions for a few minutes.
Okay, I'll run through some of the art is everywhere, sculpture and art. And this was example of where art installations are in Rotterdam. And you didn't have to walk very far to be able to see a lot of art. And this one certainly reminded me of the Moran plant, where you just have the skeletal structure. This was a giant teacup that was going to be built. And some local art where somebody could stand. It was interactive, a bit goofy, but lots of people would use it. And even down on the seashore. And this was their farmer's market. Well, somewhat of a farmer's market. You can see the bicycles parked, but this was a structure, and all food must be covered under Euro law. So this is the structure that they came up with, about the same size that they were thinking of for City Park Place. These are apartments that run along here, commercial shops and offices on the other floors. And what it looks like on the inside, these are apartments that are looking down into the space. So, and this is the Lijnbaan, the first pedestrian street in Europe. And it looks neat and tidy. Families and everybody are walking down, you know, nice and pleasant. But in the daytime and at night, the bars open, and what comes out of the sidewalk is a portable pissoir, a toilet, 3-station toilet. And so only in Europe. But then during the daytime, it just disappears below ground again. And what they would have at various events, like down at the waterfront, are these units, which would be multi-station with all the liquid going into the bottom. And these, which are permanent installations in Ghent, which are nice stainless steel smoked glass, and they're a double ender urinal. And people had no problems. Walked about 25,000 steps a day, which is about 12 miles. And so we're getting to the end here. So what can we do in Burlington to make Burlington more walkable? Any ideas in here? Programs around health that we could work in partnership with Blue Cross, MVP, incentivize a walk to work project, spoil the pedestrian, as Copenhagen says, spoil the cyclist. And that's how they have created so much infrastructure. Walking and carrying things, what can we do on that? And the benefits of seeing public art and sculpture is great. Remember, we used to have the marble competition. And and think the green triangle. You might look this up by Ernest Cullenbach. And he looks at money, health, and the environment. That anytime you do something beneficial for one of them, you almost inevitably will do something beneficial for the other two, whether you want to or not. And so you might look on this. This is a great way to think about how we live our lives. So he was the author of Ecotopia. Okay, well, that's the end of it. Bedankt, thank you. And any questions?
Thanks, Stu. That was awesome, and I love how you covered all the little things and also some of the big things, the big ideas. We did have a question from Heather about the bike troughs, whether or not those had been used in any North American cities. I did a little bit of looking at Ceres, which makes bike racks, actually makes like just an aluminum version. It's more like a ramp that could be installed on an existing stair set. And actually, my hometown of Northampton, Massachusetts, has those in one of the parks downtown. So that was cool to see. If anyone else has questions, feel free to use the hand raise function or to post them in the chat.
Well, with the ramps, no matter where you were, if you were in the middle of the country and you had an elevation change, there'd be a ramp built into it. It was just assumed that you would have an easy way to get your bike from one elevation to the other.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that it just kind of needs to be in zoning and ordinances for places where we live, so that's just a requirement.
Yep, and some people started to look at, I said, where else could we do that in Burlington? And one was down on Lakeside, where you go up to the bike path up those stairs, those long stairs. Why don't we have one on a place like that?
Right. David asked, do you know if it's easier to get right-of-way access in the Netherlands? So is it easy for municipalities to get that access?
Wouldn't know, but I would assume when they have an organization there called the Fietsersbond, which is the Dutch cycling union. And when cargo bikes started to become popular, and people were complaining that they were too wide for the bicycle paths, their response was, well, make the bicycle paths larger. They weren't saying ban the cargo bikes, just give them more room.
Yeah.
So I think that they have a willingness to experiment.
Yeah.
Rotterdam was very open, and they're celebrating everything walking and biking. They just realized that's what they should be doing.
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Let's see, Carl just asked about the recording will be included in the follow-up email that you'll get in about an hour. So you'll be able to rewatch this. If you want to actually get a copy of the slides, just shoot me an email and I'll provide them. So without further ado, I know we're way over. So thanks to everyone who was able to stick around.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. It was really interesting. I think folks were enjoying it. And thank you so much, Stu, for presenting. This was great.
Good. Well, I could also put together a bunch of other slides. I've got thousands of slides on my various trips there. So if we want to look at that, we can talk.
Yeah, I think you and I will talk about that, and
Okay.
all you folks that were attending this will certainly get you'll get an email if there are upcoming Learning Network events. So thank you all so much for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for watching.
Bye now.